Alrighty, everyone, welcome back to another Celtics Talk Weekly special episode alongside my two co-hosts, Seamus and Rob. I'm your host once again, David. We've had a lot of fun these last few weeks getting some special guests on the show, and we have another very special guest from Celtics Press Row. He's always at the games at the TD Garden. Please welcome another Celtics reporter here for Clutch Points, Daniel Donabedian. Daniel, thanks for coming on, and how are you doing tonight?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. Pretty good. Feeling a little tired after last night, the late night game, and now we got another one on Wednesday. But yeah, feeling pretty good.
Yeah, that was definitely my feelings as well. I didn't participate in the post-game show we had here on the program last night, but I woke up after falling asleep and the guys were still going close to 2 a.m., so props to them on that. My first question here for you, though, is what made you want to become a sports writer?
I think just growing up in New England, because I'm from New Hampshire, that was a big part of it. Um, just all the winning that I saw with the Red Sox, even some of the Bruins, especially the Patriots, and of course the Celtics. Just growing up in that environment where sports is pretty much king in New England, and in my family too. Like I was always just interested in that, and I had an interest in writing. I just had never really combined it until I got to school at Villanova. But yeah, it just I think my roots are just so involved in sports that it kind of inspired that.
So, how much of a whirlwind was it for you to graduate from college? You said you went to Villanova and then get thrown right into the sports journalism world here in the NBA, beginning to cover the Celtics right before they went on that crazy 2022 finals run. Obviously, it didn't end the way we wanted it to as Celtics fans, but that must have been a pretty wild time to just get thrown into doing journalism, covering a team in the middle of a pretty crazy run.
Yeah, I remember on LinkedIn, I just saw like the Celtics reporter post and was like, oh, this is interesting because I was getting ready to graduate. And yeah, that worked out well. But it was, of course, when the Celtics weren't exactly expected to go that far. Not like nowadays, where like it's pretty much finals or bust. Like that year, I don't think it was like that expected for them to make it as far as they did. So that was definitely a bit of an unexpected whirlwind, like you were saying, just kind of getting thrown into the fire. I wasn't at the games that year, but still, it was just cool to be starting up at such a exciting time. And I mean, it only got more crazy from there with the Ime stuff, and then Joe taking over, the team getting better. So yeah, it was a fun introduction into everything.
Shifting back to your time as a college basketball reporter before you made it to the NBA as a reporter, what do you miss most about your time reporting on college basketball?
Um, College was really fun, especially I mean Villanova, obviously so involved with basketball. It's a basketball school. Um, it was really close, like a close atmosphere. Whereas now it's kind of like obviously a lot of reporters. It's the NBA. But back then, even for a huge program like Villanova, you're not getting a ton of people who are covering some of those home games. So you just have like way upfront access, which is kind of cool. And I mean, just covering your alma mater while they're pretty good is just a lot of fun too. And starting to develop my like writing skills, reporting skills, because that was the first time I ever really did it. And it was a fun time to do it at Villanova too.
Was it kind of a cutthroat environment with you and your colleagues in college? And do you, I guess a follow-up question with this is, do you feel like you're in collaboration with your colleagues here at the NBA level that you report with on Celtics games? Do you feel like you were in collaboration with your colleagues you worked with in college, or is it a bit more like competitive and everyone's just trying to get the scoop before the next person?
College, I wouldn't say it was cutthroat. I mean, I was like a student journalist pretty much, so it's not like the highest level. And I was pretty much just working with one guy, mostly collaborating. So I wouldn't call that cutthroat. And then at least for the NBA, I wouldn't say it's like that either. I mean, it's definitely competitive. Don't get me wrong. People are trying to be first, trying to get stuff exclusively. Like they're all locked in on their own journey. but we're also like helping each other, at least me and some of the younger reporters. Because when I first got on, I was like, this is a lot. I don't fully know what I'm doing. But you'll definitely find people who are willing to like answer your questions, help you, like split transcriptions for different pressers, like share info. There's definitely people who have your back, but yeah, it is a competitive business because there's only so many like news outlets and there's only so many people covering the team. So yeah, it's a bit competitive in that way, but would still say it's a bit of a collaborative effort as well.
Now, Daniel, you just talked about the minute you entered the industry, not really knowing what would come with it and not really knowing what to do in some aspects of it. But you within the media game specifically, since you started, what kind of changes and development have you seen within yourself since starting the media side of yourself versus right now when you're really in the midst of it?
Um, as far as growth, I would definitely say more the kinds of stories I was doing. At least at Villanova, it was expected like, oh, do like a game recap, which is important and definitely good to do at first, but it's pretty basic. But now I've been kind of doing more involved stuff, like delving deeper into what the players are saying and getting access from that. And yeah, I guess just developing my writing more and more like personal stories, I would say, or just more interesting stories rather than the like standard game recaps, which are becoming less and less popular nowadays because anybody can watch a YouTube video highlighting the top plays of the game rather than just reading it somewhere. So yeah, I'd say the writing aspect has changed a lot. And then as far as social media, for some of my Villanova stuff, I wasn't really doing much like live tweeting or anything like that. So I've kind of developed that on the fly because that's obviously big with the Celtics, and there's just such a huge online community for the team. So it's good to tap into that, and I've learned how to do that more.
And speaking of these aspects, I love that you brought up the fact that really anybody out there can watch highlights on YouTube or a game on a streaming platform out there. But for you, in the position that you're in, do you believe that it is important for you to actually go to games in order to get the content that you want?
I think it's important, but I wouldn't necessarily say like it's essential. Like you can still talk about the team and be knowledgeable without being at every single game. Like I talk to different fans, different people that I know, just who are big Celtics fans, and they know a ton. Like it's not like you have to be in the room every single day to have like that crazy knowledge. But does it help for like developing more stories, getting the quotes directly from the sources, and just having a more like accurate in-person experience for your story? Yeah, it definitely does. And it's a huge help. I didn't always have that. Like for my first season, which was Joe's first season, I didn't go to any of the games. I applied, but I didn't get in. But then the next
Hey, we
year,
know how that feels. We know how that
yeah,
feels. Just saying.
yeah.
Calling out the
Then the
Celtics
next,
PR right now.
yeah, next year I got in, and that's how it kind of just opened up. But I was still covering the team and watching all the games and staying informed. I just wasn't there. But yeah,
Right.
it's definitely a big difference. But I wouldn't say it's like essential for covering the team.
Now, would you say that, you know, say you grew up as a fan and you form relationships with some of these guys from the standpoint of just seeing them day in and day out, but ultimately at the end of the day, we've talked about a lot on here is the objectivity of reporting is often very important. Do you find it hard sometimes to be a little impartial within your position when it comes to objectively reporting guys who you might be a fan of potentially, like deep down inside?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a fair question. I think starting out, definitely I was like, okay, now that I'm actually here, like at the games, like I'm not a fan anymore. I can't be like that.
Right.
Now, do I wish them the best? Yeah. But I definitely try to keep that impartial in all my writing and work. But yeah, that can be difficult, especially when you just see how much time these guys put in and how crazy their schedule is. Just game, practice, travel, game, like just insane amount of effort and time they're putting into this. It's kind of hard not to be like, I want to see them get to the promised land. I want to see them achieve the thing that they've worked for their entire lives, especially like the stars like Tatum and Brown, who their ultimate goal was to win it all. Like to see them achieve their life goal is pretty cool. And it's kind of hard to stay impartial in those moments. But yeah, as a journalist, it's definitely important too, especially in your writing.
Right. And you said you obviously grew up in the Boston area, right? So with that, you kind of know what it's like within the Boston sports realm with losses and how pressure cooking it can be after a single loss. Do you find yourself having to kind of more carefully craft your questions when you're talking to any of these, or you're in the environment after a loss versus a win? Do you think it's a little bit more of a sensitive area after a loss?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, these dudes, they know what it's like to win and lose, so they can handle the losing side of things and dealing with the media. But definitely, you should be a little more careful after they lose, because you might not get the answer you want if you just do like a full-on like attack question or something, and
Right.
they might get a little defensive and just kind of brush off your question. So you got to be a little careful after a loss, more so, I'd say. But yeah, they're professionals either way. They know how to handle the media.
Right. So, from a Celtics standpoint, this team has been so good for almost now 2 years. Rough stretches have not really seemed to be a common trend for this team and the squad under the KP Jayson Tatum kind of era. Now this past 3 months, December, January, and the start of February were a little bit different for these guys. Obviously 14 and 11 in that 25 game stretch. Was that different for you to cover? Because you said you kind of came in the first year, Joe, and you've been in there kind of for winning, and that's all it kind of felt like this team had done. So here you are in this new environment that's like, oh wait, we're kind of playing 500 basketball. Was that any different? Were the vibes different? How would you express being in that type of environment?
Oh yeah, for me that was different because, like I said, I came on Joe's first real year. I got to go to like 9 or 10 regular season games. I forget, but they won every one. Like I was just used to seeing them win, and then obviously you guys know, watching, like they're just winning most of these games, especially
Right.
last year, and so that just kind of became the norm. And they're a good team. And then yeah, that stretch you're talking about near the the start of 2025, it was definitely different. Some of the pressers felt a little more serious, like not as lighthearted. Like even the media room kind of absorbs the effect of that. Like when the players aren't as like happy or like goofy, I feel like the vibe for the media goes down a little too. I mean, partial or not, but yeah, it was definitely different. But at the same time, I wouldn't say like it was so doom and gloom like you see on
Right.
Twitter. Like some of the online reactions I was seeing, was like, whoa, okay. I mean, it's what, January? The season's not over. And the players know that. Joe knows that. So they're not like hitting any panic button. But yeah, that was definitely a different experience from what I was typically used to covering the team.
And since that 14-11 stretch the Celtics went on at the midway point of this year, pretty much, Celtics have gone right back to a lot of winning basketball as of recently. They've won 21 of their last 25 games. What would you pinpoint being the biggest difference in how Boston has flipped the switch here these last couple of months?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I mean, it's kind of tough. Like, I don't want to say the cop out answer where it's like sort of just naturally happened. So I think part of it was just like their championship pedigree that they got from last year. Like, they've been through the ups and downs of the regular season. Like, this is a seasoned group. Tatum and Brown have been in the NBA for a while now, even though they're still young. Drew's been around forever. Al's been around forever. These guys know like how a season comes and goes. So even when they're struggling, they're still confident, and they still believe in themselves, especially after winning a championship, that they can bounce back whenever, and they pretty much did. But I would say an underrated part of that was just all about Derek White. I think during that stretch was some of the worst basketball he's played as a Celtic, and then the team was suffering as a result. The team kind of comes and goes with him sometimes. He's obviously not their best player, not their go-to guy, but we all know how important he is to what they do. And if you look at when his stats kind of dropped, you see the Celtics were losing a fair amount. And that's when they were more healthy than they are now. Like, they didn't have their full lineup before yesterday for like a month, I think, until that Knicks game in February. And they were definitely healthier when that struggle was happening. So, yeah, I think Derek White played a big role in that. But they're champions, and it didn't shock me that they bounced back. I was kind of expecting that eventually.
Now, we did see that rough stretch in January where the Boston Celtics were going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and people started to doubt the Boston Celtics just a little bit during that stretch. But we didn't see them lose their title odds favorite title until now. But looking at the Boston Celtics and what they're able to do out there on the court, what could realistically stop the Boston Celtics from going back to back this season, in your opinion?
Well, first thing, definitely health. I mean, we saw it last year with Porzingis. That was a little nerve-wracking. Just feel for him going down against Miami, like a guy who's had so many injury issues, and you're like, oh, man, here we go again. It's happening. But they're still able to pretty much dominate, and then he had that huge game one in the finals, obviously. But this time around, if something like that happened, hopefully it doesn't. But if some injury like that happened, I don't know if they could take on a better NBA. I think the East is a bit better. The West is obviously stacked if you're lucky enough to make it to the finals. But yeah, I think an injury like that could really hurt their chances, more so than it would have last year.
Now, from your perspective, obviously there's competition out east we continuously talk about, and there are some obvious answers to this next question. But from your perspective, who is the biggest threat for the Boston Celtics out of the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, I mean, easy answer, the Cavs, which makes sense. Before that, 4-game losing streak they had recently, I think. They literally didn't have any losing streak like that all season. We're just piling wins. Started off 15-0. Even gave the Celtics some trouble. Granted, those games weren't fully healthy. I feel like there are guys missing here and there. But either way, it's got to be the Cavs. They're in first for a reason. Donovan Mitchell's a huge problem. I mean, even last year, I remember that second round, just watching him go off at the Garden. I was like, wow, this guy at times looks like the best player on the court. And he has been occasionally against the Celtics this year, just averaging 30. Now, that's not to say I don't think the Celtics can beat them. I think the Celtics still match up well. Evan Mobley's an issue, too, with his size and just how much he's improved. But I still think the Celtics could take them fully healthy. But, yeah, got to be Cleveland as the biggest threat. I know that's kind of the obvious answer. So just to throw in something else, I guess I would say maybe the Bucks. Not that I don't think the Celtics could beat them either, but you never want to see Giannis in the playoffs. Like, I don't think anybody wants to see that. It doesn't matter who's around him. They will give you some trouble. Like, he's just a force, and he's driven, wants to get back to the championship. I would say they're a threat too. But ultimately, if the Celtics have their health, I think they can take the East. But we'll see. The competition's definitely stiffer than last season.
Well, you said it. The West is kind of the wild, wild West right now. So if you were to swing it out there in that conference, you can only see one of them, right? So which one would you say poses the biggest threat if Boston were to eventually get back to their third finals in 4 years? Which one are you picking to kind of could potentially take down the Celtics?
Yeah, just watching the Thunder, I'm like, how does this team not make it out the West? I don't know. If they're healthy, I really don't see how they can't be the biggest threat in the West. They're just seeing them at the Garden. They didn't look phased. I mean, they're a young team, but Shea had no issues scoring. He got to the free throw line a lot, which is his game, obviously. But I just think they're the best team in the West by a considerable amount. I mean, the standings show that. Could they get upset? It's not impossible. They are still a young team, and they did get upset last year when they were the 1 seed. But I don't see how any team stacks up better against them on paper, at least. I would say they're the biggest threat, and I mean they're the only team so far that swept the Celtics in a season series. The
Right.
Kings could have done it yesterday, but they didn't. It's got to be the Thunder.
Does that play a factor, do you think, into kind of your decision out West? What Oklahoma City showed you? Did they show you anything in those 2 games against us that leads you to that conclusion, or is it kind of the other sample size you're seeing?
I think both. I mean, definitely seeing it in person. They just have so many guys. It's like the Celtics. They got that depth. I mean, Lou Dort's hitting threes. His defense is crazy. They're forcing turnovers all the time. Chet has range when he needs to. Shea's obviously maybe the MVP, if not runner-up, but he'll probably be the MVP, I think. They're just deep like the Celtics are, and Mark Dagnall's a great coach. They feel like the time's now, and seeing them in person, they did not seem phased, even though when it got really, really loud in TD Garden, like it was a crazy atmosphere when the Celtics were almost surging back, but then kind of petered out in the fourth quarter. But they seem legit.
Well, that kind of brings me back to the Boston Celtics from their perspective. Do you actually believe the Oklahoma City Thunder in the NBA Finals could come out with a win against the Boston Celtics? Do they actually give the Boston Celtics a legitimate matchup problem, or do you see these games at the end of the season kind of Joe hiding his hand a little bit, as we've talked about a couple times in this program? Joe, sometimes the film out there against the Cavs, maybe the Thunder, we don't play up to our standards because later on in time you can use that film in a potential series. Do you see actual matchup concerns, or do you see it as just the circumstances of the regular season?
I feel like they could match up really well against the Celtics. I mean, I think they're better than Cleveland. I think they would give them the biggest trouble for sure. But like we were saying before, that all hinges on whether or not you can even get to the finals. So I feel like you definitely got to be locked in on the East first. But I think the Thunder would pose a real threat. And as for the matchup stuff, I feel like the Celtics were relatively healthy besides no Porzingis when they came to Boston. I think they pose a real threat. Maybe the Celtics would take it in 7. It hinges on a lot. It kind of depends on health and all that, how they even got there. Like, did they have long series against who they've played? But we'll see. Definitely concerned about the Cavs first. And I like what you said about the maybe hiding players for the film. Because I know the Celtics have not had their full strength really against the Cavs. So that could be part of it. But either way, it's going to be a challenge in any conference.
Now, just mentioning the further challenges of the Boston Celtics, the Celtics are 29-7 on the road this season. And of course, in a series against potentially the Cavaliers or the Oklahoma City Thunder, or actually, technically, just those 2 teams, the Celtics wouldn't have home court advantage in those series, and they would actually have to go and win a game on the road somewhere down the line. Now, the Celtics, they're one of the best road teams in the entire NBA. Do you see that transpiring as we go into the playoffs? Do you see the Celtics being the same dominant team on the road as they've been in the regular season this year and as well as last year's playoffs?
I would think so. Maybe not as dominant as they have been in the regular season, but I don't really see it like a huge shift in the playoffs. They've shown they're comfortable on the road. They showed that last year in the playoffs. I mean, like when they were going into Indy, super loud, Pacers are fighting for their life, and they still came back and beat them in Game 4. Like they've shown they're built for the road. Excuse me. So yeah, I feel like that would logically continue. I mean, especially Tatum. I think he likes playing on the road more. Just watching him play, the way he plays, like his stats. I think he just enjoys the challenge, enjoys the enemy environment, I guess you could say, which they'll definitely experience no matter who they play in the East. It'll be hostile, but I think he welcomes that.
You talked about Jayson Tatum. Obviously, last night, Jayson Tatum coming down with an injury or an injured ankle after a DeMontis Sabonis closeout. Now, we've seen that play arise in different NBA settings with different NBA superstars, and of course, it's part of the Zaza rule. You know, in 2017 Western Conference Finals, Zaza Pachulia reckless closeout on Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard misses the rest of the series, and ever since that point, the league has wanted to put a point of emphasis on those closeouts, going, okay, we want to minimize the recklessness of closeouts, especially, you know, I think about big men when they're closing out. They really, if they're sometimes just bumbling towards their guy on the perimeter. We've seen less of that, less so lately. But do you think from what happened last night that this is a problem in the NBA, some of these reckless closeouts, that they're not exactly officiating to the level in which they're supposed to be officiated?
Yeah, I mean, it's already happened to Tatum before. I mean, I think that Bucks game where they came back in Milwaukee, Giannis kind of did that, and then that was part of the whole JB Giannis beef. But just listening to post game after on NBC last night, Scal definitely had a interesting diatribe, I guess you could say, like that the refs should be calling them flagrants from the jump more instead of like, oh, let's look at the replay, let's spend time. Like if they did it off rip, maybe that would get players to do that less. I don't know if it's necessarily like a huge league wide issue, but I hope the league does pay attention to it more, especially with the stars. I mean, everybody should be officiated the same way, but we know that's not actually what happens in the NBA. Like, just look at some of the calls stars get. Like, that's not realistically how it goes. And I mean, if I'm Adam Silver, I would definitely be nervous. Like that play almost could have hurt Tatum pretty bad. We don't fully know the extent of what happened, but imagine the Celtics lose him. How bad that would be for Adam Silver in the NBA. Like that'd be a disaster. So I think they're probably going to be looking into it at least more. Will they change how it's called? I don't know, but it's something they should probably take a second look at.
Yeah, and that brings me to the question too of now Tatum is, we don't have an update at this point in time when this is being recorded, of course, but Jayson Tatum, we know, injured his ankle on that play, rolling around on the ground in pain, came back, shot the free throws, shot the legendary free throws, right? Went back into the locker room, then we didn't see him the rest of the night. Still was able to put up an all-star array of stats on the night, despite only playing 25, 26 minutes. But regardless of that, we likely won't see too many minutes from Jayson Tatum in the next couple of games. But how do you see the Celtics? I will say it's important for us to get an update on what the actual severity is, because we don't really know that yet. This is kind of hard to answer. But how should the Celtics manage Jayson Tatum's injured ankle going ahead these next 10 games and into the playoffs?
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this before we started to record, but I really hope he doesn't play Wednesday. Like maybe he's enticed by like Kevin Durant's playing, like big time matchup, but I hope he doesn't play then. Like we don't need to see that. We don't need to risk that. I think the Celtics probably understand that too. They are probably fighting tooth and nail to get Tatum to sit whenever they can. But yeah, like you said, we don't know the severity. Doesn't seem too serious. I know Adam Himmelsbach reported he was looking pretty like relaxed in the locker room, no boot or anything. Walked out the arena, no boot in sight still. He wasn't like completely walking fine, but I think he should be okay, pretty much from what I've heard. We'll see if that changes. We'll probably find out more tomorrow. But yeah, I hope they definitely take it easy. He hit that 65 game threshold, so he's eligible for the all NBA stuff. Now, would it be great if he missed every game, like sat for the next 10? That'd be tough. because you just want to be kind of in game shape for the playoffs.
Right.
But maybe he misses like 5 of those. Not the end of the world. Would be honestly better, in my opinion. But he might disagree. We'll see.
I tend to agree with you. And when you look at Tatum's interesting because it feels like a very polarizing topic. Jayson Tatum is in like the NBA sphere. You either love him or hate him, it feels like. And when you obviously getting to see him be behind closed doors at times, right? Seeing a guy like Tatum in the environment, and you've seen big games from this guy. Why do you think, what exactly is it that draws people away from Jayson Tatum as a superstar? What is it exactly?
Oh man, I could talk about this for a while, but there's just a lot that goes into it. I feel like there's of course the things that say he's boring or whatever. Like if you care about that, which I guess some fans do, maybe he's not as lively as Anthony Edwards or some guys like that, but he wins. Nobody can deny that after watching last season. So maybe some people might think he's not exciting enough and that pushes them away from him. I honestly think a big part of it is he's just on the Celtics, and they're a good team that a lot of other teams have rivalries with. They're a huge fan base that a lot of other fan bases clash with. So there's some of that. He's just a Celtic. So there's always going to be a little pushback from some other teams, some other fan bases might not be so ready to embrace him because he's the enemy, I guess. There is part of that. But yeah, I guess there's the Brandon Jennings comments too, if you want to go back to that, about being him being soft. Maybe that ties into the boring part of it too. I don't know. That was just ridiculous, but clearly some people think that out there. I don't know. I wrote a whole article about that. It's just being like, what are we focusing on nowadays in the NBA about being soft? I mean, he plays like 90% of every season pretty much that he's been a part of in his 8-year career. So I don't think that's soft. He's pretty much going out there every night, even if it's against a team like the Kings on a second night of a back-to-back, still competing. I don't think that's soft, but clearly there are some people who have issues with that. But yeah, I think the main part of it is he's just on the Celtics and he's a laid back guy. He's not as demonstrative, which is a problem for some, not for everybody. I'm not saying he's hated by everybody. That's not true. And he's obviously beloved in Boston. But yeah, maybe all those factors kind of play into his status or his image, I guess.
Right. And you have Colin Coward saying, close your eyes. What do you see? The chalk. It's just, it's a mess. Now, you've said now, third year here for you, really covering the Celtics and going in depth with them. And you've seen 3 amazing Jayson Tatum seasons. And we were talking about this last night on our post-game show, the evolution of Jayson Tatum. And it feels like this season in particular is kind of a culmination of everything coming together for him and his true development. Do you think that this form of Jayson Tatum is the fullest and best we've seen in his career?
I think that'd probably be fair. I mean, his passing is just crazy. He's finally hit 6 assists. He's just consistently piling up more and more assists as he's gone on in his career. He's obviously scoring. He's shooting the 3 ball pretty well. I don't think his percentage is maybe that great, but still he's hitting him mostly when they need him to. He can drive, obviously. He's a complete player. He can do it all. I mean, his defense is great. Still probably a little underrated, I'd say, maybe for people who don't watch the Celtics. But yeah, he's doing it all, and he just knows how to gel with this core. He knows how to play with other guys who are great, like JB and Porzingis when he's good to go, and the rest of the starters. He knows how to elevate his team, even when it's like those bench lineups with him, like Luke Cornett. He's making those guys better too, which is what you see the best players in the NBA accomplish. And he's starting to do that more and more. we saw that last year too. It's not completely a novel development, but I think he's just doing it more. And yeah, it's been pretty cool to see.
And just lastly on Tatum, do you look at Jayson and do you kind of pick him out as the face of the league? Do you think he deserves that title? And we've talked about so much, we don't get to decide, right? Really, at the end of the day, it's the players and the one who wins and all that. There's so much that goes into it. But if you were to kind of put your finger on it, would you kind of point towards Jayson as that guy?
I think he could be. I don't know. It's kind of tough. Like you said, we don't decide. Obviously, Celtics fans are going to say he is.
Right.
The rest of the NBA might feel differently. I feel like once we reach the post-LeBron, KD, Curry era, whenever that might come, 2 or 3 years, who knows? But when we hit that, we'll definitely have a better idea. I feel like it will be kind of multiple faces of the league. Like maybe there won't be one central guy. Like it's kind of hard to find a guy on LeBron's level. Like
right.
playing like basketball aside, just playing aside, just his level, his status is so crazy. Like away from the game too. He's been famous all of our lives. There isn't really anybody like that for the current NBA. So it's going to be hard to reach that level. But Tatum has the accolades. I mean, he's got the gold medals. He's got the rings, all-stars, probably another all-NBA first team, likely. I mean, he's got some of the accolades and accomplishments. If he does it again this year, if the Celtics do it again, I mean, I feel like that debate's really going to start to ramp up, and it's going to be kind of hard to deny him being the face of the league if they win again. I mean, that might be tough. Like, going back-to-back isn't easy. But, yeah, he's definitely a candidate for it, at least, I'd say. At least.
All right, so we're going to end with some fun questions here. So we've had some of your colleagues here on the show. We had Cam Tabatabai on the show, Bobby Kravitsky on the show, and we've asked them this question. Players often talk about, what their welcome to the league moment was. I remember Tatum hopping on a podcast and saying when he checked in his first game against the Cleveland Cavaliers and realizing that he was playing up against LeBron, that's when he realized stuff was serious now. For you as a media member, what is your welcome to the media moment then?
Well, first of all, shout out Cam and Bobby. They're doing great stuff. Maybe it was like my first time ever like having a Celtics media event. Before I even got into the games, I went to Celtics Media Day in 2023. And just being there was crazy, like pulling up to the Auerbach Center. And I was like, whoa, we're going up the elevator, seeing all the different stuff they have in their facility, the practice court. I was like, is this like actually happening? And then just sitting down in the media because I showed up so early because I was like, oh, I can't miss this. I got to be.
How could you not?
There.
How could you?
Yeah,
not?
I was like, damn, I got to be here right there. I was like an hour and a half early. I was really early, but still, it was awesome. And then Brian Windhorst like sits next to me. I'm like, these are people you see on TV all the time, and obviously they're real people, but just being next to them and stuff, like, oh wow, this is crazy. Like this is real. So probably that. Yeah, my first media day.
That's interesting that you mentioned that because I remember Whit Grousbeck saying on that media day too that the vibes around the team were so high. Like obviously we still had a whole 82 games to play, but obviously this is right after we acquire Porzingis a few months beforehand, and then I believe we acquired Drew Holiday, whatever it was, days before media day. So
yeah,
did you sort of have that vibe and feeling as well that this was going to be a good season as soon as you sat down hour and a half before media day started?
It felt pretty special. I mean, especially seeing Porzingis come in, he just looks so happy. I mean, you're coming from the Wizards, who obviously stink, and now he's getting a chance to compete for a championship, and he just looked like so happy, and it was hard not to get excited, I guess, for the season and the team. Like everybody else looked pretty happy too. So yeah, it was definitely an upbeat attitude going on, and it clearly carried over.
For us here that are aspiring to be in your position at some point, going to the games and asking questions pre-game and post-game to the players and coaches, can you sort of put it into perspective, or I guess describe in words what it felt like for you the very first time you asked a player or coach a question as a credentialed member of the media?
Yeah, it was definitely nerve-wracking. I'm trying to remember what the first thing I asked was, or to who. I think it was probably to Joe. But
Wow,
yeah,
what
I
a,
mean,
what a way to start off.
Joe. Yeah, that's why, like, you got to be ready for Joe for sure. Like, you can't just be like, oh, whatever, maybe I'll ask him for that, because he'll just like either blow you off or be like, what? So you definitely got to be ready. I kind of can't remember what I asked, but something about rebounding, I think. Either way, yeah, it's pretty nerve wracking. I was like, oh wow, this is real, especially since I haven't had like a ton of reporting experience. I mean, I did it at Villanova a good amount, but it's not like I'd ever done it on a stage like that, not like the NBA. So yeah, it was definitely a little nerve wracking, but you get more used to it as you go, and it's obviously pretty cool just getting to interact with guys like that.
Now we've heard about some Joe Mazzulla encounters here on the program when it comes to the podium, but looking more so at the players, just the players, right? If you look at all of the players on the roster, the Celtics roster right now, obviously, a lot of the team does not show up at the podium, but when it comes to mining content from this team and getting good quotes at the podium, who do you know at the podium comes to the podium every single time with good answers for your questions? Who is the most, I should say, content driven player when it comes to their answers?
I could go down a few. I mean, like Luke Cornett doesn't get up there a lot.
Yes, that is the common answer we always
that
have.
makes sense.
When
I'm
he
like,
gets
is
up
it Luke
there,
Cornett or is it not? That's basically what the question is.
yeah,
That's
when
what
he
it's
gets up
forming
there,
to
it's
be
really
now.
funny. It doesn't happen all the time, but when he gets up there on the podium, he's really funny. He just has like such a unique view on some of the stuff, like of the going ons of the NBA. He's not the average NBA player for sure. Jaylen Brown, a player who actually gets to the podium a good amount, definitely has some good answers. Trying to think who else. Tatum has some good ones sometimes, but I mean, these guys are so media trained. So when they get loaded questions, which they will often, they pretty much know how to navigate them, maybe diffuse it a little. But yeah, Jaylen Brown keeps it pretty real. He'll be pretty honest. And Joe, there's just funny moments. But yeah, I guess I'd pick Luke for his rare occurrences. They're just always entertaining, and he always makes the media room laugh like at least once.
That's pretty interesting because we've literally we've had the exact same answers on this program. I mean, Luke Cornett first, Jaylen Brown second. That's what people often say is Jaylen Brown. He's coming from more of a serious perspective, I would say, from the podium, and then Luke Cornett. He's kind of that fun loving guy when it comes to literally anything. I mean, out there on the basketball floor, you see him barking the other night, and then the interviews with Abby afterwards. And if he does show up at the podium, you're always getting some good quotes on Twitter. So I'm very fascinated to see that. That's been pretty much the straight line answer out of everybody when it comes to who is really giving good quotes at the podium. But I'll ask the other question on the other side of this. When it comes to the players, we know that coaches can be really tight-lipped. Out of all the players, who do you think on the Boston Celtics is the most tight-lipped? Who is the hardest player to actually mine questions out of? I know you mentioned Tatum and Brown; they're very media trained, but who really on the Celtics roster is it just they're a hard nut to crack?
Hmm. I mean, I think every player's come in with at least one or two interesting things, but they're all pretty seasoned to just know what questions to kind of like dodge a bit. So I don't know if I could really like pick out one player who I'd say is like extremely tight-lipped, I mean, none of them compare to Joe at the end of the day. The players will
We've
tell
heard
you
that
more.
before. We've
Yeah,
heard that specifically
true.
on here. We're like, Joe says nothing. Joe says nothing. You can never get anything out of Joe that tells you he's one way or the other. He's always forward on his agenda. I mean, just from an outsider's perspective, when it comes to Joe Mazzulla, I mean, he doesn't stray off the path of what the goal is for the team and what they're trying to do on a gamely basis. But yeah, Joe Mazzulla is certainly not. But sorry, go ahead there, Daniel.
No, I was agreeing with you. He's very focused, very driven, and yeah, set on that goal. So yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't think any of the players in that regard really compare to him.
And one final question for you here tonight. What is your favorite Celtics memory ever?
Ooh, this is a tough one. As a kid, at least, I remember just watching the Celtics parade in like second grade at school. That was crazy. It's just like a memory that I'll never really forget. It's not like perfectly clear, but I just remember that moment. And now at least recently, I have a lot more. But to pick one, I would say Game 5 of the finals, halftime or just before halftime, Peyton Pritchard hits that insane half-court shot that we've all seen a million times now, and will be probably like the shot from that series. And just hearing how loud it got, people were going crazy. Bob Ryan's literally in front of me, and he looks like stunned. He like turned around. He was like, did that just happen? And I'm right there. I'm like, I don't know. That was crazy. So like everybody, even the guys like Bob Ryan who've been doing it for 50 years, their whole life, who are in the Celtic City documentary, dudes are so like accustomed to that. We're like,
Right.
wow, like that just happened. And then the crowd atmosphere was obviously crazy because everybody could like taste the fact that they're gonna win. They're like finally almost there, and yeah, the whole place just exploded.
I'll add
When
this
you're
question there, Daniel. Have you seen the couple first episodes of the documentary?
Yeah, I've seen the first 3. Yesterday that time airing was kind of bad because it's like they come out at 9, but the Celtics are playing, so the real fans are watching the game. They're not watching the documentary. I guess you could watch it before, but that was a weird timing. But yeah, I've watched the first 3 and enjoyed it. You can see the back of my head at the start of the second episode. So cameo appearance.
There we go. When you're sitting there in one last question I just thought of, when you're sitting there in press row with everyone in the finals and it's all reporters covering the Celtics, Pritchard just hits this buzzer beater. Are you guys just trying to stay impartial, trying to stay professional, or does the whole fandom come out and you realize like, holy cow, this team I grew up and love and now cover is about to win it, and I can't believe I'm going to be seeing this in person?
That moment was definitely like, I feel like it's an exception. I don't know how many people were like, just like stone faced during that. If some people might claim they were, even like the reporters, I don't fully believe it. Like that was insane. Just from a pure basketball perspective, like a dude hitting a half court shot in the NBA finals in a potential series championship clinching game. It was just crazy to see. Like it was like a moment of just shock. So it was kind of hard to not be reserved in that moment, fandom aside.
I'm sorry, I gotta hop in here. I know we said what last one like 2 times now, but
No, you're good. You're good.
When you said growing up a Celtics fan, and then especially seeing the Tatum and Brown era, right? It's like they've been bashed, but prior to last year, they were bashed, they were labeled as chokers, that they would never get to do it. And then here you are sitting there in the Garden, Game 5, right? And you said your favorite Celtics moment of all time, right, when you were a kid, was sitting there watching the parade, and you're in second grade, and here you are now in the Garden, right, for a Game 5, for a closeout series, and then seeing that live, right, and seeing Tatum and seeing Brown and just how much could you feel in terms of the emotional aspect of the game of basketball come out when that happens?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a crazy full circle moment. I mean, I guess I've never really thought of it like that. Like in terms of me, like growing up watching it, it's crazy that that gap in between where they didn't win, I literally grew up. I became an adult. So that's just cool when you put it like that. Um, and at Brown and Tatum, for them, it was just cool to see these guys, like you said, labeled chokers, lose game 7 in 2023. So many people are like, break them up. They can't win together. They can't play together. They're too similar. Like, break them up. Even they don't like each other. Just some nonsense like that. Just hearing that all the time and then them proving that wrong and like accomplishing their goals. I mean, I remember Cam asked Jaylen Brown a question about his grandma, and he just started crying after they won it all. Just moments like that, you see the emotion, and these guys just work their entire lives to have that moment like that, and not everybody gets it. I mean, not many people make the NBA. Not many people win it all. So just to see them achieve that after a fair amount of obstacles they experienced and just all the like media noise that they had to deal with was pretty special and cool to see them overcome that. Like fan or not, just cool to see people overcome those obstacles and achieve pretty much their life goal in front of you.
Well,
Exactly.
that kind of brings me. Do you have from that night? Well, extra tidbit here from that night. Do you have any special memories from the post game celebration from them winning the championship? We know we've had a couple of stories in here where
Yeah, Terp
like,
had a
oh,
good
guys are
one.
shooting
Terp had a
around
really
on
good one.
court.
Yeah.
You see the social media guys are going crazy. They're doing all these different things around the arena all the way up until 4 or 5 in the morning. Do you have any specific memories from that night from the post game celebration?
Yeah, I actually had to work the next day for my other job, so that was annoying. But I mean, I
Uh,
stayed up late. Like I think I left the arena at like 3 a.m. Yeah, like
Ooh.
I'm sure Turpin said, JB came in, and I think like they started playing. They were playing in front of him, and he was like, "Oh man, that's beautiful." I think that's what happened. Unfortunately, I wasn't there for that, but I remember just being on the court after, and it's like really only some staff members of TD Garden, like I think the people who might make some of the food, and just seeing the nets cut down, the confetti everywhere was just cool. Like being there after hours after this insane accomplishment that the city hasn't seen in over 15 years that every Celtics fan was hoping for and like looking forward to. That was pretty cool. Do I wish I stayed longer and got to shoot around? Yeah, but uh, either way, it was really cool
Got to use one of
experience.
those sick days, man. You got to pull out a sick day. You got to pull that out of your
Yeah,
back pocket.
I should have been like, oh, I feel so bad this morning. I mean, it was okay. I didn't have to get up until like 9, so it's not like I got to get up super early. But still, yeah, I wish I definitely stayed a little longer. But
Right.
I had my work done, and it's like, okay, I should go home. But memorable either way. Memorable. Either way.
Right.
But what is the process like? We obviously there are 82 games in the regular season. Half of them are on the road, half of them are at home. The Celtics, they won the championship at home, which was a extraordinarily special moment for them to actually do it back at the Garden. Everybody wanted a sweep, but it was almost it was a little lucky. The Celtics they got kind of manhandled there in Game 4 against the Mavericks, and it created this special moment back in Boston where the confetti was coming down, and really the scene when I picture it today just from an outsider's perspective, it's it's like we're playing 2K. It's like we're watching a movie. It's like we're watching some kind of commercial from, the 2000s where, oh, the Cubs win the World Series, and then it's like, oh, it's just a PlayStation commercial. That's really what it felt like when the Boston Celtics won the championship. But for you, obviously you were in the building for that moment as we're talking about. And as a media member, you definitely have your routines and access points for throughout the regular season and maybe into the playoffs as well. But for the moment in which they win the finals, what type of access does the media actually gain when it comes to the on-court celebration and everything that happens afterward? You guys are probably in media row once the game is dwindling down. But after being in media row, what is more the process for when a team does win a championship? As not too many reporters could really answer this question. You're one of the special ones who can.
Yeah. After Game 5, the pressers happened as normal, same place, except like way more people spoke. So that was cool. We were getting to hear from like literally everybody one after another. During the ceremony where they're like naming the MVP and stuff, like you had to like run down, and I didn't have time to because the TD Garden elevators are not good to say the least. And I was like, oh man, I gotta get a view of this somehow. So I had to like run into the stands with the rest of the fans. So everybody's taking their camera out, recording. I don't know if any of the media members, even like the highest access people, got to be like on the floor. I don't know if they could do that. Like to the writers at least. Maybe photographers and team employees. I don't know about the writers. So that I still had like the fan view for that, which was still really cool. I mean, you don't got to be right there. And then after the game, everybody just leaves. So we were just on the court with some of the employees eating pizza, drinking beer, because there was plenty of that around. But yeah, it was a cool experience. Like, and for Villanova, I was lucky enough to see them win the Big East championship when I was there covering the tournament. So I got to go on the court for that, which was crazy, and see them cut the nets right there. But at least for the Celtics, it was kind of more of a further back view, but cool all the same.
That's very interesting because we see obviously the scene out there, and when you see everybody out on court from the outsider's perspective watching on TV, which you probably have many times for other teams as well, it just seems like everybody is out there. It just seems like it almost is as if like anybody with access near the court gets out onto the court. But really hearing that that it does kind of bring to mind that you don't really see too many writers out there during that occasion. But it's still what you said. It's still very cool to be there in that moment and be so close to really NBA history. That was NBA history last year, and there are always moments of NBA history, whether it is the finals or not. But you mentioned you were on court. Have you ever shot around on the TD Garden court before, on the parquet floor? Have you ever taken one shot?
Nah, I haven't. Can't say I have. I mean, we're not
Do they
supposed
do
to.
media basketball games anymore too? I mean, I remember that used to be a thing within the Celtics media cohort. Do they do that anymore?
I've heard chatter of that.
Okay.
At least since I've been here, it hasn't happened yet. But every
We got to
now
get in
and
this
then,
game. We're Celtics media too. We got to get in this game too. I mean, we got.
I'd be all for that. I'm down. I mean, I don't know how big of a team they could field, because then there's not a ton of reporters. But I'd be open to it. I hear chatter of it every now and then, like, oh, we should like bring it back. But to my knowledge, it hasn't happened in a bit. But that'd be cool, and I hope you guys would be for that for that too.
We got to. I know they've done it in the Auerbach Center before, or the old practice facility. I forgot the old practice facilities now. I guess just another version of the Auerbach. I don't remember. But I know they've done it in the old practice facilities. But I'm thinking, got to get out there on the parquet floor. Got to get out there on the garden floor. I mean, that's the special place. I mean, I know the parquet in the practice facilities. It can be equally as special too. Anywhere there's parquet, I'm willing to consider it special for the Celtics. But ooh, that would be. Can we do halftime? Like, get the little kids out of here. Get the media members out on court at half. Let's do it. Let's do
That
it.
would be crazy.
I'm for that. I'm for that.
The laptop,
It'd be like-
go down, take a three. That'd be crazy.
To quote the great big ticket, it'd be like a bar fight out there with all the media members out there at
Yeah.
halftime. That would be fun to watch. Where can people find you, Daniel? We're going to give you a chance here to plug any of your social medias if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, you see on the ticker right now at Daniel D1214 on X, Twitter as I call it, but on X, that's usually what I'm using. That's usually where most Celtics people are. I'm also on Blue Sky, I believe, at Daniel D NBA or NBA Daniel D. I forget, but I don't use that as much. And then if you want to see anything I'm writing, just look up Clutch Points Celtics, or look up my name and Clutch Points. It will come up. And I'm just looking up Blue Sky so I can. Yeah, Daniel Don NBA, and then the usual Blue Sky social stuff. I don't use that as much, but if you're on there, you can follow me there. But yeah, mostly just at Daniel D1214 on Twitter.
And for whoever's watching, we'll have all those links in the description down below for you, so you can just go down there and check them out.
Sounds good.
Alrighty. Well, that is going to do it for this special episode with Daniel. We want to thank you again, Daniel, for hopping on. This was another great interview. We learned a lot more about sports media. We got some great insight on the Celtics and your history here as a Celtics fan. So thank you for all that. That's going to do it again for this episode. Thanks everyone for watching. We're having a lot of fun putting together these episodes with some great guests coming on. There's going to be even more guests coming on in the coming weeks, which we're super excited to have some more people on here as well. So keep watching. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and we're going to keep putting together great episodes for you guys. Alrighty, that's going to do it for us, everyone. Have a good one.